Good afternoon, everybody. This is Maureen Baker from the studio on the pond in Massachusetts. I live on a beautiful great pond, and at some point I'll give you a tour of the inspiration that inspires me to paint. A lot of my work, I am inspired to paint when I travel also. Today's a little chilly, so I don't think I'll give you a tour today, but I promise that I will give you a tour of the surroundings. So today I'm gonna paint with you a beautiful sunset that was inspired when my daughter lived in San Diego, and there's a boulevard in San Diego called Sunset Boulevard. And this is the sunset photo that I took while I was out there. It's one of them. And so this is the inspiration for today's painting. So I'm going to switch over so that you can see everything that I'm doing. And that will be great. So this is the painting that I did initially. This is the initial painting that I did. And I'm going to be using DecoArt Traditions paints today. All right. And I do have a kit available, and in the kit, you'll get the surface, the instructions. You'll be able to see the whole video on the YouTube channel, and you'll get a 1 ounce bottle of each of the colors that we'll be using today. All right. The brushes that I'll be using, which are not included in the kit, I do have kits of brushes, are Dynasty Black Gold and one Dynasty Mezzaluna. We're going to be using chisel blenders today. Chisel blenders are a little bit shorter than a shader, and it makes it much easier to paint, to blend out. And a lot of what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be doing a little bit of glazing, but a lot of what we're going to be doing today is going to be blending one color into the other. I'm going to go over a couple of theories that, if you need to watch the video a couple of times, it's okay. Don't get lost into the theory and don't think it out too much. It's really a visual thing. But I am going to go into some basic ideas. And the first basic idea that I want you to remember when you're painting a sunset or a landscape is that there's basic principles of color mixing. And if you mix yellow and blue, you're going to get green. And it's extremely unusual to have a sky with a green tint to it. I don't see it. I never paint skies with green tints. So cerulean blue does have a warmer tone to it than ultramarine blue. And you could say that it has a slight green tint to it, but you don't want it to be green. So I'm going to show you how to buffer through that so that when you apply your colors, when you paint in your colors, you don't end up with a green sky, a bright green sky. So we're going to start, and I do a slight line drawing when I start out, okay? And that gives me an idea, if you look, of where the blue areas are and where the oranges are. Okay, so we're going to start with that. I'm going to start with a 14 chisel blender. Okay, and I'm going to just paint it in, and we're not going to worry. It's not important that this sky be exactly the sky that I saw. It's important that I get the sense, the feeling of what I saw that day that was so jaw-dropping to me. That's what I'm going to try to achieve in my painting, and we're not going to worry. We're just going to paint. This first color is cerulean blue, and I went ahead and mixed it up. It's cerulean blue mixed with titanium white and a touch of raw sienna. And the touch of raw sienna is going to give us a nice warmer, a little bit of a warmer tone. It's also going to take away some of the brightness because I've neutralized it with a brown. All right, and we're just going to paint in some of this bright blue. And the base of it, this is the horizon line, and we want that horizon line to be nice and straight, because as you look at the horizon, it's a nice straight horizon line. All righty, and we're going to paint that in. This is the only area in which I probably could have used a much bigger brush. So I didn't list that on the instructions, but you could use a bigger brush if you had one handy. But I'm using a 14 Fizzle blender, and we're just going to stroke in the water. Okay, now there's an area in where the sun shines down into the water that I really want to have pretty light. And I have a mix here in which I mix. The other thing you want to make sure of is that when you're coming across the canvas, you come across in one direction. The water is going across the horizon line, and we want to keep it going, moving in that direction. We're trying to create movement. We're trying to create a little bit of atmosphere, and we're trying to create movement. So it's really important that you brush in the direction of your movement. Okay. Now down the middle, which is right about here, this is going to be very light right in here. Okay. Down the middle, we're going to have some light. So I'm going to mix in. Okay. I created this mix. It's approximately 6 parts titanium white and 1 part raw sienna. All right. And we're going to just paint this in down the center. As it comes down, it gets wider, and that's really more than anything because it's closer to me. So I'm seeing it wider, not whiter, wider. All right. There we go. Now up in here, it got a little too wide. So I'm just going to go back in with some of my cerulean blue mix, and I'm just going to soften it out. There we go. Okay. I am going to bring that in all the way to the top. Now, that's good. And this is just, don't worry, it doesn't have to be exact. Okay, we're just going to blow through it. Okay, one of the most important things about painting is to roll with it. Just flow through it, flow through the painting. If you have to adjust, you adjust. If you don't have to adjust, you don't have to adjust. The more relaxed you are, the better your painting is going to be. All right. And your painting is a reflection of you, not me. All right. We're going to add a little bit more back up in here. And then I'm going to clean off my brush. This is acrylic. It's a water-based paint. So I clean in water. The advantage to acrylic is that it dries pretty fast, so I can just keep painting. All right. I am going to put some straight titanium white out on my palette. All righty. I'm going to start to bring in some of this mix that I had, which was 5 or 6 parts white to 1 part raw sienna, but you can tell it's not warm white. It definitely has a buff to it. It's got a definite buff to it. This, I'm going to put in this right in here. Like I said, it's not important to me that it be exactly what I saw. I'm going for an atmosphere, and I'm going for movement. I do want it to be a sunset. I don't want it to be a sunrise. So the coloring on that is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to go right in up in here, and we're going to blend it in. And this is done in layers. There's layers upon layers, and this is a basic. This is just the blending in part, first part of it. All right, and we're slip slopping it in. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that pretty already? All right, I want to keep that horizon line nice and straight. I also want to make sure I use enough paint that we don't want to see the canvas. You can buffer your canvas with gesso. Okay, the more gesso that you apply to it, and the more you sand it, you apply the gesso to the canvas, and then you apply, and then you let it dry, and then you sand it. Okay, and the more times you do that, the smoother the surface is going to be. Right in here, I'm going in with some straight titanium white. Okay. If I have graphite lines, I want to make sure that I'm not fighting a graphite line, and I get rid of them this early on in this painting. Okay. I don't want to be fighting a graphite line while I'm doing anything else. All right, here we go. And that's your first step. Okay, that's your first layer of color that we have. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to introduce color. Okay, we're going to introduce color to the piece. All right, and if you remember, okay, these are, okay, this, I'm not going to make this dark. This is too dark for me. Okay, but we are going to mix in some darker blues. Okay, and there's a lot of oranges, and there's a lot of yellow. Okay, and remember what I said, we're going to be a little bit careful as we go into mixing the blues. Okay, as we go into the blue area of the painting, we're going to be a little bit careful. All right, so that we don't come out with a green sky. We don't want green sky, and we don't want bright green water. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to hold on to this palette. I'm just going to set it aside. Paint's all mixed. Okay, I'm going to create a new palette. Okay, and in that new palette, we're going to put in some Hansa yellow. And we're going to mix an orange. Okay, so we're going to have Hansa yellow. And then I'm going to add Naphthol red. Okay, and I'm going to use approximately half the amount. Okay, so it's going to, the formula is going to be approximately 2 to 1, and that's a little bit more than 2. That's a little bit more than 1, rather. So when I pull it out, I really don't want that much red in it. I'm just going to move it out away from my yellow. And I'm going to make orange. All right. Okay. I'm still working with a 14 brush. All right, and we're going to start this at the bottom. I'm going to start with yellow. Okay, I'm going to be a little bit careful against the water. Remember what I said, we don't want bright green water. And we're going to come in like that. And we're going to just soften that out up into the sky. Soften it into the white. Soften it up into the sky. Okay. Just lay it down, soften it out. Hold on to my white. If I overstroke the white and I'm unhappy about that, it's okay. I can just go back in and add some more white. Okay. Now I'm going to take this while this is still wet, and over on this side, I'm going to put in this orange. If I went in with straight red, it would be much too intense. It would be very, very intense. And then I'm going to soften it out. Okay, it's pulling. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water to my brush. Water is medium. And I'm going to soften up into the sky. Now, the thing about this is that it is beautiful. So I also don't want it to turn to mud. Okay, and I'm going to turn it to mud if I mix too many colors together. So I want to kind of keep the colors a little bit separate, but I want to blend them out. Okay. I'm going to buffer it with that mix that we made. We made a mix. I made a mix of titanium white and raw sienna, and we're going to buffer that right out. Okay, as we come up into that blue area that I have up there, we're going to buffer that right out. Okay, because we're going to put some blue in here. And I have to have a buffer to blue to add the blue. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more blue in here. As you can tell, I'm working wet on wet. So it's a little bit lighter. Okay. I want to be a little careful that I don't turn it green. But I added a little bit more of the mix of white and raw sienna to soften that out. There we go. We're getting there. All right, up in here. I'm going to put out some more of this mix. Go. Well, I can go back and forth a little bit to make sure I'm happy with what I'm doing. As you can tell, I'm using this mix of raw sienna, which is neutralized, and white, because I want to go back in and add some more blue. Just right there. Okay, there. And soften it out. Up in here, we're going to add a tiny touch of yellow. Up in here. And a tiny touch of the orange to that yellow. I put the yellow down first. I don't want it to be too bright up there. And if it gets too bright, we're just going to tap in a little bit of this this warmed up white that I warmed up with raw sienna. I didn't warm it up with cadmium yellow. I don't want it bright. And I want it to be distinctly warmed up. Okay. Again, over here, we're going to do the same thing over here. So we're going to touch down with some of this titanium white right there. I'm going to touch down with it. Touch down with a little bit of yellow. Staying away from the blue. I don't want it to become green. And touch down with some orange. Clean off my brush. Go into this mix of white and raw sienna and just soften it out. I want it to be a little brighter than that, so I'm going to go back in. Okay. And there's a little bit of back and forth here, back and forth, push and pull. There we go. Okay. That's good. A little bit just right up in there. And that is coming along nice. I'm really liking that. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of right in here. I'm going to add a little bit of my white with my raw sienna. And then I'm going to add a little bit of blue. Then I'm going to just blend into the sky. Okay. Warm white and raw sienna to buffer it out. The buffer is going to stop the sky from turning green. We really don't want a green sky. A little bit more light in here. There we go. There's a tint of blue in there. Okay. So that is a really good basis for the sky. We're going to come down here now and we're going to do a little bit of work in the water. Again, we're going to start with some of my mix, some of my white mix. I'm going to put it in. And while it's still wet, I'm going to put in some of the orange. All right. And then I'm going to go down like this. Needs a little bit more white. And a little bit more orange. Whoops. Now see, that's good. I'm glad I did that. That's a mistake. You don't worry about it. You just soften it out because there is orange down there. If it's too much orange, you just add some more white. See that? Now there is some areas in here that I really want to hold on to the blue. All right, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to hold on to the blue. If I lose the blue as we come down, all right, I'm just going to go in with some of my white mix, go back in with my white mix, and go back in with my blue. Yep. There we go. Yeah. All right. So we have begun. All right. The next mix that we're going to make is that we're going to take our base mix. We're going to move the reds and yellows out of the way. We're going to take this base mix of blue. All right. All right, this is cerulean blue and white, about 2 to 1. So I'm going to take this, all right, and I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to it. There you go. Ultramarine blue is closer to the middle of the blue. Heads a little bit into a little bit into red. It's got a tinge to it that's probably a little bit redder. Okay, and then we're going to take this mix that we created of ultramarine blue. We're going to add a touch of red to it, and it's going to turn it purple. Now, okay, so we've got this here. All right, we're going to look at this right here. So this, now this has white in it, and it has white because there's not bright purple in the skies, but there is a tinge of purple. So we're going to mix that purple up. There we go. You can add a little bit more down to this end of the puddle of the red. All right. When we look at this, this is the dark blue, but we're really going to use a lot of purple in there. We're not going to make it quite that dark. All right. We're going to add a tiny touch of Prussian blue to our canvas, to our palette, just in case we decide we need it. And we're going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue. Okay. One of the first things that I'm going to do I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some orange to the water so that can be drying. All right. And I'm going to add a little bit more orange down in here. It's a little bit more intense. There. There we go. Okay, here we go on the purple. I'm not going to delay anymore. So right at the horizon line, it's purple. It's definitely purple. Okay, right there. And I don't want it to dull everything that I've done down. So I'm going to soften that out. Just like that. This is a medium bodied paint. It's not a heavy bodied paint. It allows me to really stack colors one on top of the other. There we go. And we're going to come down underneath here. And we're going to bring this purple in right here. Okay. A little bit more over here. Then we're going to come up here where we saw the real dark areas, and we're going to bring in purple. We're going to bring that purple into that orangey color, and we're going to soften it out. If it starts to pull on me and won't soften, then I'm going to add a little bit more water to my brush, not a lot. These are really blending techniques. Okay. Gives that little bit of glow around that blue area. And we're going to come down here. This is all done with purple. And it's not even. Okay. Another really dark area that I want to create right in here. And up in here. Okay, we're going to just blend it out. Pinch the paint off your brush if you have too much paint on your brush. And we're going to blend it out. Come in from over here. These colors are beautiful colors. They're DecoArt Traditions Fine Art paints. And they're highly pigmented. They're not a heavy bodied paint. They're a medium bodied paint, which affords you to, you can add mediums to it to make it a much heavier bodied paint. You can add texture products to it. But by using them as they are without altering the body of the paint. Body of the paint is the thickness of the paint. By doing that, you have a lot of options as far as blending or floating, or we don't float, we smush the paint. Everybody moans when you float. Glazing, all of those things with a medium body paint are really strong options that we have. All right, and we're going to just blend that out. And then we're going to tap, 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 tap to get that texture. I'm going for texture. Okay, going for texture in the sky. Okay. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that coming out beautiful? All right. Remember what I said. Now we're going to go into an area that's going to have a little bit more pink. Okay. And how do we get more pink into it? We're going to add it right to the blue that we had. And we just added a little bit more red to it. I don't want the canvas, the texture of the canvas coming through. I need to add a little bit more paint. Pinch it off my brush. And soften it out. There we go. This pinky blue, we're going to bring a little bit of this pinky blue into the water. Down the middle. Okay, and we're going to bring it out a little bit more out on the sides. I'm using the flat of my brush. Doesn't have a lot of water in it. It's just laying color down. Good. Good, 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 good. All righty. Be able to see the whole thing. Yeah, it's coming. All righty. The next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to start to do a little bit of work on the water. Okay. I'm going to go in with some ultramarine. Okay, so I have 3 palettes going. And by keeping these palettes all separate, okay, they don't become muddy. I really don't want this muddy. So the palettes are all separate. We have 3 separate palettes. And we have a good ability that way to keep them clean. If you notice, I'm using one basic brush at this point. Okay, so we're going to go in now with the first color that we're going to put out on our palette is going to be ultramarine blue, right out of the tube. It's not a tube, it's a bottle. And we're going to put out cerulean blue. Okay. I'm going to clean my brush off really, really good. All right, I'm going to make sure that my canvas is nice and dry. Okay. I'm going to go in and I'm going to wet my canvas. I'm going to wet just the water. Okay. I'm going to go with a bigger brush to wet this in. Okay, this is a 1-inch brush. 14, which is closer to a 1/2 inch, just is not going to work out as well. So we're going to go with a 1-inch wash on this. All right, I'm going to side load the 1-inch wash in ultramarine blue. And I'm going to start to streak it into the water. I'm going to stay away from heavy paint going into the center. all the way over. So I bring it into the center in areas, but I don't bring it into the center all the way over. And I'm going in one direction. You don't want a hurricane. You want to keep it going in one direction. It's on one side of my brush. That way I have a lot of control. And we're going to soften that out. And yes, it goes over certain areas. Definitely goes over certain areas in the water. There, look at that. But there are areas in which I didn't bring the paint over. At this stage, although there's different valuations and gradations, I don't want distinct waves yet. Okay, this is a little too distinct up here. I'm gonna go over that. There. And I'm gonna bring in some darks. There we go. So at this, what I'm doing now is I am holding on to some of the areas of the water that I'm going to leave a little bit light, and some of the areas are going to have a little bit more dark. And I'm blending it out. Look at that. Isn't that great? That's looking good. Now, there are more than one colors in the water. See this? I don't want to have a distinct anything. So I took some of the paint off there. We can have a softened out dark area, but you don't want a distinct, don't want a glob of paint there. It's not good. We're going to go back in to cerulean blue now. Cerulean blue has a little bit more green in it. Ultramarine has a little bit more pink and pinky tone to it. And when you're, some of you are probably scratching your head saying it looks blue, and it is blue. Just on the color wheel, if you pulled out the color wheel, it would head towards green, or it would head towards purple. There we go. Now there's a couple of areas that are really light that I kind of lost. So I'm going to go back in with my 14, and I'm going to bring them back. And I'm going to bring them back with my toned white. It's toned with ultramarine, remember? So I'm just going to blend them out and bring back a light area. And that's the other thing about using ultramarine is that it's neutral. It's very neutral. It's not a bright yellow. Right. So we're going to go right here. And we soften it out. There's a push and pull to every painting. So the fact that you have to go back in, don't be surprised. All right, and that is some pretty light areas that I wanted to hold on to. Okay. There, that's good. That sky is nice and dry. Katie? I am gonna have a few areas in the sky for drama, and I'm going to add a little bit more ultramarine blue too. It's going to make it a little bit darker. All right, right up in here, but I don't want it to look like a stormy sky. It had a beautiful sunset, and I want to hold on to that beautiful sunset. Like I said, there's a couple of areas of the sky that I want to intensify the blue just a little tiny bit. There we go. If it gets too intense when it dries, you just go in and just touch down just very, very lightly with this toned out white. There we go. Now, I lost a little bit more of the orange over there than I wanted to. So I'm going to put it back in. And I lay down the toned white first, and I put it back in. I don't hit the purple with it. If I hit the purple with it, it's going to turn brown. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to add a little bit of texture to this, which would really be kind of like probably clouds. But there's a little bit of texture in there that I want to get in there. And I'm just tapping it in. Just tap, 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 tap. Okay, over the white, I can add a tiny, tiny bit of orange right in here. There we go. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to do is above this orange, I'm going to tap in some white, toned white, and then I'm going to tap in some yellow. And that's going to be nice and bright. There we go. All right, right up in here, we're going to tap in some yellow. And a tiny bit of orange. There we go. Going to go in with some straight ultramarine blue. I didn't clean my brush off enough, and I blended it out on my palette, so I didn't get it onto my piece. I went in and cleaned up my brush, and we're going to just blend this into the blue. There we go. And come down. It's almost like a dry brush. We're going for texture. Okay. There we go. Area over in here needs a little bit of this toned white. And then we're going to bring in some orange. All right, up in here. Cleaned off my brush. Just pinch the paint off my brush. Here we go. Very good. Got a little too intensely ultramarine with the ultramarine, so I'm going to soften it out. Better. Okay. Back and forth, back and forth. Okay, now. We're going to do some more work on the water. Okay. I do think as I look at this, one of the things that I want to do is I want to buffer this in right in here with a little bit of orange. I laid down my toned white. Little bit of orange that I'm going to do right in here. There we go. I'm loving that. Okay, just a little bit. Okay, look at that. All right, now this area right in here, I'm going to push this like this. Got messy, and I'm going to clean it up. This horizon line, I'm going to clean it up first with my toned white. This horizon line needs to be straight and solid because that's the way it is. It's just the way it is. This was as clear as a bell night, and the horizon line was very visible. I'm going to just make that adjustment now. I'm going to go in with some yellow. Going to go in with some orange. I'm going to let that dry. And then I'll go in again with some purple. Okay. Very muted purple. So at this point, we're going to get some darks in here. And we're going to put out some Prussian blue on our blue canvas. It's not a canvas, it's a palette. All right. And I'm going to define where those dark waves are going to be. All right. And they're rolling into shore. As they are out here, out in here, they're much smaller. We're going to put one here. We're going to put one here. Comes right into the middle. And then we're going to put a big one right here. Maybe. It's going to come in like this. This is going to come in at an angle. It's what it did, and it makes it much more interesting. At an angle, and then like this. This side wasn't nearly as rolling. There we go. All right. Now, dark part comes in. And you're going to need your other palette to do this. I'm going to set up both palettes over here. I can go over there. All righty. So we're going to go in with some of our mix. And the mix is going to blend into it. Prussian blue has a lot of green in it. And it's going to come through as you blend it out. And that's all right. It's got a beautiful dark to it. It's just awesome. I can go in and buffer that with some ultramarine blue. I'm going to get the area in back of it a little bit darker. I'm going to add a little bit of Prussian blue to my brush. As it comes into the center, it's not going to be as dark. There we go. I do want to soften it out. If I need to, I'm going to take some of this toned white so that I can get it to soften right out. There we go. And we're going to soften that right out into the piece. A little bit more ultramarine blue back in here. Lots of paint. Don't be afraid of the paint. There we go. And this surf is coming alive. Right below this is a light. As it comes into here, we're going to blend in that white. There we go. And a little bit of ultramarine blue in there just to soften it out. I don't want to lose the dark. And if it gets too green, add some ultramarine blue to it. There we go. Go. Then we're going to keep going down. Okay. This one, as it comes in, is bigger. It also goes out at an angle, which makes it really interesting. Softens out. If I need to go clean my brush and go in to the white mixture, I'm going to. There we go. A little bit more Prussian blue. And a lot more ultramarine blue. There. Nothing solid. It all has movement. We're going for movement. I'm going to start to pull this way because this is getting a little bit closer. And soften it out. The other thing I don't want to do is I don't want quite such a hard line in here. So I'm going to soften that line out a little bit. To bring in a little bit of light. And I'm going to blend it out as it comes into the center. Some of these dark blues cross into the center. All in the blend. This paint has a great amount of open time, which is going to help with these blends. I did wet my brush down a little bit to soften this out. All right, and then this is big. This is also going to chop in up in here. This is going to crash into the shore. There. Again, some ultramarine blue. It is not. There we go. If your waves aren't in the exact same spot as mine, that's fine. You want to create movement. We're creating movement. What we're doing. We're going to go back and forth between the lights and the darks. We're going to start to pull this way to create that movement, to get that movement going. This one comes this way as it's crashing into the shore. We don't see the shore in this painting, and that's all right. We're going to go back up and we're going to bring in some ultramarine blue, which is nice and bright. As it hits close to the center, we're going to bring in some of that light blue. And as you can see, the light blue looks much lighter against the darks. So the darks make the darks make the lights lighter, and the lights make the darks darker. You have to remember that. If you put down white on your canvas and it doesn't look white, it's because your darks aren't dark enough. There we go. We want that movement coming into the shore. Okay. Ultramarine blue is a little bit bright. It's a great companion to the Prussian blue for this painting. Because the Prussian blue is very green, very green. and below that we're bringing in to give some of the back texture for the waves, for the back waves. They're really not waves, but there definitely is movement back there. And we want to make sure that we don't, that we create that movement. Add a little bit of this mix of the original blue back there if it gets just a little bit too dark. There we go. Everything is softened out. Oh. We're at what we call the middle stage of the painting. We haven't brought in any of the details yet, but it's coming right along. We should, at this stage of the painting, I should have movement. I should, and I think I do. All right. And then in finish, we're going to create even more movement, and we're going to make any adjustments that need to be made. One of the things that I do see is that there needs to be some carry through into the areas that are showing as a reflection. So I'm going to do that pretty carefully right now. The other thing I want to make sure of is that the texture of the canvas doesn't come through. If it is, then I don't have enough paint on the canvas. I don't want the canvas to get chalky, but I need to buffer it. All right, I needed to buffer it. And now we're going to go in and we're going to add some color in there. So that is a secret to keeping your colors clean when you're using colors that you don't want to blend together. You buffer them. All right, right in here, we're going to add some lights for the reflection of the sun. Okay, this is that toned white. We want to make sure that we have that reflection. That's what this painting is all about. That's intensifying that movement. Now this area right here is just a little bit too light. Right in here. So we're gonna, there we go. We're gonna, this is ultramarine blue that I'm using in here. There. And as much as it's blended to soften one into the other, there are distinct areas. So this is ultramarine blue, but it's, you can still see the light area in it. It's not solid, it's streaky. I'm going to go ahead and I am throughout it. I'm going to bring in some cerulean blue, which is going to add a nice tone to it here and there. And it's going to take some of the brightness of the ultramarine away, which we kind of want to do. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to let that show out. And we're going to work back on the sky. We're going to bring the sky into finish. Okay. All right. So when I look at the sky, there's some areas. I'm going to move all of these palettes out of my way. I'm going to throw on the floor. And we're going to go into some white. And I'm going to dry brush some texture into the sky. All right. I am going to put out some of this mix that I have. It's titanium white with a touch of raw sienna in it. It's much warmer. I'm going to go in with a dry brush. This is a Mezzaluna brush. This Mezzaluna brush is made by Dynasty. And it's a great dry brush. It's a great texturing brush. So the first color that I'm going to use in texturing is I'm also going to put out a little bit of Fancy Yellow. So the first color I'm going to go into is going to be the toned white. It's white toned with a touch of raw sienna. And around some of these blue areas, I'm going to go in and I'm going to dry brush in and I'm looking for texture. Okay. So I'm going in with this toned color, toned white, just like that. I'm going to pinch the color off my Mezzaluna brush and I'm going to go into Fancy Yellow. And I'm going to very carefully, very lightly add a tiny touch of yellow into it. And what does the yellow do? It makes it glow now. And it's in there. Then I'm going to buffer it one more time. This is going to come in a little bit further. There. Go into some white. We get a nice bright glow around this dark area, which happens at sunset. It's textured. You don't want it to not be textured. Toned white around the orange. Oh, Now, I lost a little bit of my orange in here. I did that on purpose because my orange wasn't smooth enough for me. It's a little, there's too much canvas showing through. And so I'm going to do this with my Mezzaluna brush, and it's going to give it a nice dry brush. Then I'm going to go in with my toned white. Soften it right out. Look at that. Isn't that not wonderful? That's nice. I like that. That's what I wanted. All right. These kind of techniques would be challenging to do in oil. Oil would be a totally different technique. Now, the transition from the orange into the purple needs to be a little bit more fun, a little bit more texture in there. From the orange into the purple. There we go. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit of yellow in there. Okay, didn't turn brown. And that's a good thing. I'm going to clean this brush off, and how I'm going to clean this brush off is I'm going to put it in white so that all the yellow gets out of it, pinch it out of my brush, put it in white, pinch it out of my brush. And I'm going to go into a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. Remember, I have everything on separate palettes. And I'm going to add a little tiny bit of dark in here. There we go. If it's too dark, which it just did, I'm going to go back into the base, the first blue that we did, which is a light blue, and just soften it out. This is really the finished part of the sky. We're in the finish. All right. Remember to buffer those colors. There we go. Right here, we're going to put in some strong white. This is not white. It's toned white. It's been toned. It's the toned white that we toned with a tiny bit of raw sienna. Okay. Toned white. Soften it out as we move into the little bit of yellow section. Toned white. Toned white. I'm going to go in with the first blue that we used. I want to soften that out. That got too important. There we go. And toned white. The yellow part of the sky, I didn't want it to be that strong right there. So I just toned it out. Still there, still a touch of it. And finish, you make those kinds of adjustments that you want to make. All righty. All right. Once again, we're going to increase the texture over here. We're going to just go back and forth. We're doing this with a dry brush. And then we're going to soften into here, into the orange. Right here, we're going to bring in a little bit of yellow right in here. Soften out. This is with the toned white. And we're going to bring in some yellow right in here. And it did not turn weird, a weird color, because I buffered it. I buffered it with the toned white. Okay. Again, we're going to do that again right in here. And right in here. There we go. All righty. Right in here, we're going to come in and we're going to come in with some orange. We buffered it first. The orange lays down on a dry brush, too strong. You don't worry about it. Go in with that white, toned white. No, not titanium white. It's a toned white. There we go. Beautiful sky. We're going to mix some of that purple again. I ran out of it. So we're going to take some of the original color. We're going to add a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. The original blue, which was cerulean blue. I'm going to add a tiny bit of ultramarine blue to it, and then we're going to add some Naphthalene red. That is a little dark. And that's okay. I'm just going to add some more white to it. There we go. Yeah. We're going to go in with a clean dry brush, Mezzaluna. I'm using a Mezzaluna brush. And we're going to, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to blend it out first. It's much too strong. We had to adjust this. I had to adjust this for the horizon line. There we go. I'm going to add, now that we're in finish, I'm going to add a tiny bit more of ultramarine blue right down in here. And we're going to do that on both sides. to make a little bit more drama coming in there. There we go. A little bit more orange right there. We're going to soften it out. We're going to let that sit. You can go back and forth a couple of times between the orange and the purple, and you want to make sure when you go back and forth to let them dry. This is acrylic. It's going to dry darker. The orange and add just a little bit more red to it for right in here, right around the sunset. I'm on the chisel edge of my brush. And there we go. A little bit more yellow. This is straight yellow right in the center. Right fancy yellow. Right in the center. There. And we're going to take straight white. This straight titanium white that we're going to buffer this with.
I was wondering, are you planning on yeah, I'm thinking of you first. Yeah. So I'm never able to.
Okay. So we are good here. There we go. Just a tiny touch of red we just put in there. I just put in a tiny touch of red. Right here. There we go. I know I was too focused on painting and not talking to you about what I was doing. There we go. Okay, now we're gonna do a little bit more work on the water while we let that dry. And we will do a little bit more dry brushing on the sky. All right, in the finish on the water, okay, we're gonna focus on the blues. So we're gonna move the palette that's right next to me again. And we're gonna focus on the blues, all right? All right, and this is the final part of the painting. So we're gonna really take care. And I think that I'm gonna drop down a brush size. I'm gonna drop down to an 8. This is an 8 chisel blender. All right, and we're going for a couple of things here. We're going for movement. Okay, so right in here, and we're gonna pull it down like this. All right. And we're gonna pull it down like this. And this helps create the movement the way I want it, the way the waves are moving. And that's what we're going after. All right. So we have some ultramarine blue and some Prussian blue. Prussian blue is much darker. The ultramarine blue has a tendency to take some of the green out of the blue. It's adding a little bit more of this, adding a little bit more blue to it. So the tone is a little bit better. And then up in here, and I'm just brush mixing these. There's no real formula for them. And remember, the goal here is to go after texture. We're going after texture. All right. After texture. All right. So right in here, I do have a wet brush on these. It just makes it flow a little bit better. There we go. Back up in here. All right. Pull it out like that. And that pull in the direction that I'm pulling in is going to help with the wave. And we're into finish now. We're into, and they're not perfectly straight across. If they're perfectly straight across, we want to give it some movement here, because they're not. The waves are not perfectly straight across, even back out in here. You want to give them some texture. Okay, so you like touch it down and pull it up. Pull this way, touch it down and pull it up, and pull this way. All right. Prussian blue, ultramarine blue. Next beautiful, beautiful color. Pull, pull, touch it down, pull, pull. Don't forget, you want to hold on to some of that light too. And then back up in here, it's not going to be quite as intense. Okay, and here we're going to add a little bit more intensity. There. Okay. And then this one is going to come in and be a little bit intense. Okay. Now this right here needs to be softened out just a little tiny bit. Yeah. There we go. And back in here. And we're going to leave some light in here, but we're going to bring in some texture. And there we go. All right.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. We're gonna do this over here too. And we're gonna, and with this, we have a little bit more control. We're using a little bit more control. And we're bringing in texture. We're going for texture and movement, texture and movement. And we're doing that by a dancing brush. Add a little bit more water to my brush, which is going to clean it off and dilute the paint. But this back in here, even though we have texture, okay, it's not as bold. It's not as obvious. All right. This got a little too light in here, so we're going to add a little bit of ultramarine mixed with a little bit of cerulean blue as it comes closer to the center. Okay. I'm going to soften that into the center with, I cleaned off my brush. I'm going to soften that into the center. There we go. All right. We're back to ultramarine blue and Prussian blue. Ultramarine blue and Prussian blue. Go.
So we got to test it slow before we laugh. And then see that. So 3 days later. So.
And Prussian blue, I'm using Prussian blue right now. I'm creating texture. I'm using Prussian blue mixed with ultramarine blue. And we have nice movement, nice movement. All right. And there we go. And there we go. And I'm going to go in to the original mix of white with this got a little too dark. And we're going to go in and soften that out. There we go. There we go. And there, that light needed to come back into that area. Okay. Again, ultramarine blue. This time I'm going to mix it with cerulean blue and bring texture in, but it's not dark. There we go. And ultramarine blue and Prussian blue, and we're going to put in a wave. Remember, the wave is not going to be straight at this point. We're in finish. We're going to give it a little bit of movement even at the top. There we go. And we're good. All right, we're in the home stretch here. All right, we are in the home stretch here. There we go. Now I'm going to, at this stage, add some foam to the top. And when we do that, we're going to put the white down and then we're going to roll it. Okay, put the white down and roll it. Pinch my brush off and then texturize it and soften it out. There we go. Look at that. Is that cool or what? All right. This is the toned white. There we go. And then into the center, we're going to bring in, all right, we are going to bring in the toned white into the most intense areas. Okay, it's toned white. And then we are going to bring in orange. All right, we have that orange mix. We're going to start to bring that in. We're going to bring that in because it's really not, we're not going to leave this area white. Okay. Going to bring that in. Orange. Okay, this is orange that we're using. And this is reflection. All right, here we go. Then we're going to bring in some yellow. Area back here that I just noticed, I'm going to clean this brush off. It's got way too much comments to it. Doesn't have enough texture in it. We're going to go in and we're going to bring in a little bit of texture, just like this. You don't want it to get too dark. We definitely want it to have texture. Just a little bit. My brush, if you looked at my brush, it's barely touching the surface. All right. There. Much better. Need to pat it in. Then pat in just a tiny, tiny bit of the toned white. There we go. And we got texture. Now we're going to do something a little unusual. All right. And we're going to go in with a 14. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this is bone dry. I'm going to dry it. Let's do this. We're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to go in with a 1-inch wash. All right, we're gonna go in with clean water. And we're gonna put some water down over the whole thing. Yep, I can hear you now. I can hear all of you. Oh my God, what is she gonna do? First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna tone it with cerulean blue. And when we do this, we're gonna stay out of the reflection of the sun. All right. And we want this to be very transparent, and it's just a tone. What it's gonna do is it's gonna marry it all together. And we're gonna tone it with cerulean blue. All right. There we go. Then we're going to go in and we're going to tone it with red. And when we tone it with red, we're going to touch down into the paint. We're going to blend it out on our palette. All right. It's very, very, very transparent. Very transparent. Okay. That's really purpley. And we're going to take this and we're going to tone here and there with this red. Go into the center and off to the sides. There we go. There. Is that awesome or what? We're going to take our 8. We're going to go in to our toned white and down in here. This is our toned white. We're going to intensify our highlight. Here and there. Got red on my brush, didn't want red on my brush, cleaned it off. Remember, it's only paint. All right, toned white. That's going to intensify the reflection of the sun. Then we're going to go in to our toned white. And we are going to, on the chisel edge of our brush, we're going to bring in some of the foam on the waves. Okay. I am going to bring some in over here. Even though in the actual photograph there weren't any, I'm going to bring some in because I think it will work well. Not intensely. There we go. And then we are going to call it a painting. And I hope you learned some great stuff. So, Maureen Baker, and I will put a link to my website and you can get kits. And we're going to have lots and lots of these demos for you on YouTube this year. This is the first of many, many of them. So have a great day and we will see you all soon.